Good afternoon, and welcome all of you here in Political Alexandria. And we are here to celebrate the graduation of some of our students, graduate now, from our beloved Alexandria University. And let me just start by informing you all we have many students who are going to be graduated today from Alexandria University from nearly about 19 countries from our beloved continents. So I'll start this celebration. Honorable Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, my dear students, member of the African League of Young Masters. My name is Salah Salman. I'm Professor of Pesticide Chemistry and Toxicology with Alexandria University, advisor to Political Alexandria, and proud to be the mentor of the African League of Young Masters since it was created 2 years ago. It gives me a great opportunity and honor receiving you here in this very famous place, Political Alexandria. And as you all know, from here, in this place, in the very edge of our great continent, our beloved Africa, we, the African, for a long time did carry the Promethean spirit and knowledge to the whole world. The African people living in this age, the Egyptians, are in fact an amalgam of all the African elements. So welcome on a part of your historical and cultural places. Welcome to you all. Now, I'm proud to introduce to you the director of Political Alexandria, Dr. Ismail Saguddin, the librarian of Alexandria, with his long history serving his roots in our continent while he was the vice chairman of the World Bank for nearly about 2 decades. So Ismail Saguddin, start with you.
Thank you, Dr. Salah Suleiman. Welcome all to the Library of Alexandria, and a very special and warm welcome to our League of Young Masters, for much of what I have to say is really addressed to them. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a very real privilege to be here and to welcome you in our institution. As Dr. Salah Suleiman said, it is also the institution that for many, many centuries carried the torch of learning throughout the world, right here from Africa. What I have to say is also very specific, because I also have the honor of having served several times in the past as the co-chair of a number of panels for the, well, going back a long way for the Organization of African Unity and then for the African Union. And I did serve as the co-chair of the Strategy for Biotechnology, which is in the little book, which I hope all of you have had a chance to see, called Freedom to Innovate, and it's in 3 languages. And I now serve on another committee as the co-chair of the Committee on Science, Technology, and Innovation, the STI. And that's what I want to present to you today, because all of you young people are really going to be carrying the torch for the future, and this is very much about the thinking that is now pervading the institutions of Africa on how to promote this effort. It is mandated by the heads of state and government of the African Union, and our final report will be given to them in January of 2014. So if we start with STI, I'd like to say a word about the challenge, and then 5 aspects: policy, human resources, institutions, and the public and private interface, and then financing. And then, since I think all of us here are Africans, we can be very honest with ourselves. We have to look at past efforts and say why they did not succeed as much as we would have liked, and talk about how we're trying to remedy that in our current strategy. So without further ado, let's start. There's a huge urgency to promote science and technology worldwide, for the world is changing at a very rapid pace, driven by science and technology, primarily, of course, connectivity and ICT is changing the face of everything. Business as usual will only leave an ever-growing gap between the have and have-not nations. I mean, this is something we cannot accept. We have to do a special effort. Otherwise, there will be those who are left behind. And we know that of the billion people who are still going hungry in the world, a very large number are in Africa as well as South Asia. These are the two areas where the bulk of poverty, of that kind of extreme poverty, is still found. Just to give you an idea of how big the challenge is, if rich countries are on average 40 times, have the per capita income of the poor countries 40 times as much, they actually invest every year 220 times as much per person in scientific research. So that gives you an idea of the challenge we have to overcome. This, my friends, is a modern agricultural research lab. And this is an old picture from Asia, very diplomatic here, since we have many diplomats from Asia, not from Africa, showing a rice farmer 2,000 years ago and a rice farmer today. 2,000 years ago, today. If that situation doesn't change, we are going to have a new form of apartheid, a scientific gap between those who are using modern science and everything and those who are left behind. Now, we need local S&T capacity to use and contribute to the world's resource of knowledge. It's not just to contribute, but to use it, because increasingly in the era of biology, as opposed to the era of chemistry and physics, things are not the same. In other words, the transistor is a transistor in Kenya, it's a transistor in Egypt, it's a transistor in Norway. But the organism, the plant that grows in Minnesota does not grow in Chad, and so on. So we have ecological adaptation that has to be done, and we need our local science and technology capability, especially in the light of all transformations that are taking place. And universities, of course, will have an essential role to play in building S&T capacities in our countries as well. The second thing you should note is that the pace at which technological transformation takes place is faster and faster and faster. As you can see, for example, water-based textiles and iron took 60 years, and steam trains and steel 55 years, electricity 50 years, petrochemicals 40 years to become into the cycle. Now, it's an 18-month cycle for IT. New laptops, new telephones, new everything. Within 6 months, it's obsolete. Things are changing very rapidly, and if you look just at the possibilities that are taking place even in ICT itself, it is remarkable. A computer, where a conventional computer might take 1.6 million steps to do a calculation, if you use DNA algorithms, it could be done in 90 steps. It's amazing transformations. Amount of knowledge in these fields is doubling every 18 months, and the capacity to process it is growing exponentially. But we in Africa have to ask ourselves, does our education and training system nurture scientific abilities and innovation? Do we have a way to systematically identify innovations from our own people and to act on them? How can we ensure that innovations actually get transformed into useful technology as opposed to remaining scientific papers that are of interest to other scientists only? For in the end, the transformation of our societies is about technology, which is about the deployment of science into society for utilitarian means, and that, of course, will require innovations. So we must focus on building up our capabilities. And already, about 10 years ago, all the academies of the world, including all the academies of Africa, academies of science, got together, and I had the honor of co-chairing that panel as well with Dr. Paris of Brazil on how to build capacity for science in developing countries. And it was adopted by 95 academies from all over the world, and we were asked to present it to the United Nations as the scientists' view about how to build capabilities for the future. And we did that seminar where you can see Kofi Annan and Mohamed Brown was then head of UNDP, and Mandela of South Africa was the managing director of the World Bank. So what do we have to say? We have 5 recommendations. Policy, number 1, which is science and society. Human resources, institutions, public-private domain must be better understood, and financing mechanism. Contrary to what my colleagues expect in Africa and in Egypt, finance is not the problem. Finance is the last thing. If you don't fix the other 4, you will be throwing money and not getting results. So let's take them one at a time. Policy number 1, you have to have a policy for science, to promote science in your country, but also use science in the formulation of your national policies. And the governments must adopt the strategy, identify priorities, and they have committed themselves in Africa under the CPA, which was the Comprehensive Program for Action, which we evaluated in this new report, to commit 1% of GDP for science research. I regret to say in the 5 years, not one African country, not even South Africa, not even Egypt has done it. But R&D expenditures are only a small part of the picture, because if you notice, the red here is what the private sector contributes. These are all the countries of the world. And the blue is what the public sector contributes. So to mobilize the private sector and learn to work with it is part of the problem. Now, government policy must be coherent and promoting science, which is not the case. We must fund the public goods. And scientists must be involved with the media to explain to them the reality of how things are. Nehru said very beautifully that the future belongs to science and those who make friends with science. And that is true. We have to organize scientifically, but we in Africa have to learn to listen to our scientists. I show you this particular front page of the Washington Post on a very important day, September 11, 2001. Of course, the events have not yet occurred. But guess what? Front page, the 2 main reports. Science group differs with President Bush. Broader stem cell research is recommended by an Academy of Science report. And the EPA, Dr. Salah Saliman's favorite institution, urges tighter rule for arsenic. 2 scientist groups are speaking out and getting front page attention in the most important paper in the most important capital in the world. Where in our African societies do scientific groups, when they speak, get attention like that? So unless we do that, this is what I mean by science for policy. That means the scientific community must be engaged with the media, the civil society, private sector, and others. Number 2, of course, is very clearly human resources. But I hate to tell you this because Egypt in particular is a very bad example and very sad example of what I will show you now. Additional years of schooling do very little to improve economic growth. In fact, you can hardly tell the difference. These are -4, +4 years around a median. And when you distribute that, additional years of schooling hardly make any difference. On the other hand, the quality of education as measured by student achievement, immediately you start seeing the difference. Slope is positive. The more quality as measured by a comprehensive neutral exam, not culturally bound, conditional test score, does result in conditional growth of the economies. So you can see very clearly these relationships. And even more also in terms of how people are compensating it in the private market. So human resources means improving science and technology education at all levels, from kindergarten to postdoctorate, starting young, allowing people to think, children to think, and nurturing their abilities, despite the fact that we are very much deprived of capabilities compared to, say, Germany. This is from Germany, this particular picture. So our children are deprived, but it's up to us not to break their spirit with making them repeat things until they learn it by heart, but in fact to engage them into thinking and challenging them. And engage them, it's fun in science. This is a very beautiful picture. This is a statue of Albert Einstein standing next to the US National Academy of Science. And this man is our good friend Bruce Alberts, who was the president of the Academy. And this is a visiting classroom from primary schools. And they come with the president of the Academy of Science and sit on the lap of the statue of Albert Einstein, and the visit to the Academy of Science is a lot of fun. It's not telling them, don't you dare, don't touch them. No, I mean, come and discover and learn. That's what we do. We need to teach our children to question what if. That's the spirit of science. And the content of the curriculum has to be acquired. And imaginative ways of looking at all problems by policymakers have to be defined, such as what? Brain drain. Well, brain drain. What do we know about brain drain? Well, for one thing, of course, we do have a lot of brain drain in Africa, and lots of people go out and don't come back for various reasons. And in the United States, in fact, non-citizens have been a much larger number of the doctoral degrees than the citizens of the United States, and many of them stay. But those who wanted to stay, those who get offers to stay, are increasing. The brain drain is shown 27% of the doctorate holders in the US labor force are foreign born. So here's an interesting graph that shows co-authored papers between scientists in the US and scientists in the home country. And this is the percentage of foreign-born doctorates. So the more you have some of your doctorates staying in the United States and they collaborate with people at home, then you get a greater degree of collaboration. Well, that's not quite true. Now here's the interesting part. If you look at these two countries, two groups of countries, they have the same number of brain drain, but look how much more collaboration this one is getting and how little collaboration this one is getting. Now why is that? These are our policies. The policies we implement here in Africa that enable us to work with these people and to link them back from the diaspora back into our African roots in order to build up institutions. I am one who lived in the diaspora for many years, and I came back to build this institution and to work with others. Now, the universities are going to be important, but the degrees are important, since we are going to be celebrating that today, but the quality of governance and the promotion of the real values of science are important. I start our criticism with ourselves. Are our national universities doing that well today compared to what they were doing when I was a student, when Salah was a student? No. Quality has come down. We have made the mistake of simply increasing the numbers, but not staying with the quality. Are we teaching the proper scientific method, from observation to hypothesis to prediction to experiment? For in science, authority rests in the empirical method, not an individual or a theory or a belief. Are we practicing the values of science, which are what? Well, truth, for one thing. Any scientist who fabricates data is immediately ostracized from the community of science everywhere else in the world. In fact, this was done by the South Koreans, as you may recall, in a very big scandal after Dr. Won Woo-suk was given the highest medal. He was considered a national hero, and it turned out that his experiments were untrue, and his colleagues accused him of faking data, and he's never been heard of again. And this was a very important case because they are the ones who uncovered it and said, no, this is not good science. There was no such thing. Oh my God, you're going to embarrass our country. Don't do this. No, commitment to the values of science is higher than anything else. And in fact, that's why South Korean science is still good today. The second one is honor. You do not steal somebody's work and put your name on it. That is the second worst crime. Sir Cyril Burt was struck from the records after his death when he was discovered that he had plagiarized someone. But we honor creativity and imagination. The people who make the leaps of imagination like Albert Einstein. And in science there is a constructive subversiveness where young people will come and transform the paradigm of the past. Remember, Jim Watson was only 25 when he could discover DNA. There's a tolerance of engagement with the new because you don't know where it's going to come from. Werner Heisenberg created the first version of quantum mechanics at age 24, and he formulated the uncertainty principle at age 26. So all of you here are the future. You are the builders of science. Paul Dirac was 26. He got his Nobel Prize at 31 with Schrödinger. But science has also, in its toleration of new ideas, it arbitrates things with the scientific method, with evidence, not opinion. Not opinion, evidence. That's what it does. And that's why Albert Einstein says, no amount of experimentation can ever prove me right. A single experiment can prove me wrong. Because everything I say is conditional until somebody else is going to change it. And you, younger people, are going to change it. So, we believe in method. It's not a system of belief. These values are important for all societies, not just for the practice of science. They're societal values. And science can inspire and move the imagination. And the international scientific community has truly become a single cultural force that affects all cultures across the planet. And the values of science are forged by student practice and teacher example. As special outreach for women. In the Library of Alexandria, I'm very proud to say, in fact, some of my colleagues among the men directors are saying, hey, we need a special affirmative action program for men, because there are so many women managers who are doing so well in the Library of Alexandria. I'm very proud of them all. So women in science need to be recognized. And they need to be recognized, they need to be given opportunities. And in particular, we have to recognize that society puts a bigger burden on women when it comes to the family and child rearing. And we have to adapt to that in the way we deal with how careers are developed. Otherwise, there will be double standards. Now, institutions, we have to recognize that there's a central role for academies. I'm happy to say the African Academy of Sciences now, spans the continent and does good work. And we should promote centers of excellence, including networking, consortia, competitive grants, and the like. Networks of excellence and centers of excellence exist everywhere. If you look at the United States, the top 100 universities out of 4,200 universities receive 22 billion out of the total 27 billion federal fund, 100 universities. That's the amount of R&D expenditures are in the same 100 universities. If you look at the academic patents, the top 100 universities account for almost all the academic patents, and the other 4,200 account for very little. So what you're talking about is that these are the drivers of excellence in every country. Yes, they help raise the others to a better level, but you have to have those peaks of excellence, and they work together with the best peaks of excellence in the work as well, because the best capacity building is by working together. And South-South collaboration is real. China, Brazil, and now India are working with Africa in a number of places as well. But collaboration alone cannot build capacity in the most lagging areas. You need direct input as well. After a certain level, collaboration alone can build capacity. When countries have reached a certain level of advancement, that collaboration with the top scientists can help transfer what is needed in the country. Now, the ICT revolution will deal with digital libraries of the future, one of my favorite topics, but not perhaps for today. The public-private interface, which I showed you before, is not well understood. What it's about is really understanding what the public must do and what the private sector can do. The private sector is not going to replace the public sector in a lot of things. We need the public sector's involvement in what is known technically as public goods. But already the private sector has passed more than 2/3 of the global R&D research, and this requires that we deal with imaginative solutions for intellectual property rights and copyright issues, especially in the areas of informatics and biology. But you can see wonderful examples of collaboration between the public and private sector, especially in Japan. And this is what it looks like: an industrial cluster, corporate technology cluster, and an intellectual or academic cluster. This particular one is in Kyoto. That's what it looks like. And they service the companies, because here the idea is not just to do the science or to find a technology patent. It is to transform that into something that is deployed in society and then raises the level of society. So now we have technological incubators, and these are growing in Africa as well. And right here in Alexandria, in Burj Al Arab, we have one. And in Cairo, we have another one near 6th of October. Well, that's all very nice. What about money? Well, that's where we start coming into the financing. And yes, it is important. And it can be done through global funds, sectoral funds, regional collaborations, private sector, etc. Brazil has done very well with the sectoral funds, but this is what I want to talk about. The venture capitalists. Now these are people who recognize talent of young people and are willing to invest in an idea and accept the loss, because every now and then they will find something very valuable. So in effect, they're putting pennies in order to make millions. You can do that. Well, why? Because if you're good at it, you can recognize the jewel amidst the pebbles of the ideas in front of you. But I say, my friends, let's be honest, whether it's in the African world or in the Arab world or in many parts of the developing world, if you had a group like that who came to you and said, we have great ideas going to change the world, who would have invested? This is Microsoft Corporation, 1978. And this is Bill Gates, world's richest man. The question is, would you have invested if a bunch of kids, African kids, had come to some very wealthy people and said, we have a great idea about something called Windows that is going to transform the world. All we need is $2 million to get started. Or you get Larry Page and Sergey Brin who come and say, we have this crazy formula that's going to transform the world because we're going to call it Google, and it's going to... Well, they were graduate students. Bill Gates dropped out of college to found Microsoft Corporation. He didn't finish his degree. Steve Jobs invented Apple and Macintosh, along with Steve Wozniak. Both of them were in their 20s at the time. And as I said, Larry Page and Sergey Brin invented Google.